Welcome everybody to this webinar where we will talk about how to query Google Analytics data with SQL in BigQuery. We have previously talked a bit about BigQuery and what that is. And we have previously talked about SQL. So now we will go hands-on and show how to get started and what benefits it can give you. And let's see, people are writing in the chat that they can hear us. So I think we're all good, Anton. And me, who will be doing the demo, is Johan Strand. I work as a partner and senior digital analyst at Control Digital. And I have to say that BigQuery is probably one of my primary tools when I help our clients. And with me today, I have Anton.
Yes, first, Johan, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you good.
Perfect. Okay, yes, my name is Anton Giselius. I'm the co-founder at Control Digital. I work as a digital analyst and team lead here. And I've been working roughly 15 years with technical web analytics. Stop there.
Great. And we both then work at Control Digital.
Yes. So we work with, we're a measurement and digital analytics consultancy. We work primarily with the technical parts of analytics, but also with the analysis per se. And we talk about our services as cloud for marketing, where we have like a roadmap for our clients, where we work with the client-side measurement, server-side tagging, mostly GTM server-side. But where we enter the cloud world with setting up marketing data warehouses to have one single source of truth and one environment to work with all our data, and that's where we can apply ML analytics.
And what we're going to talk about today is the very simple question, but just to set the stage here, why do we need BigQuery for Google Analytics, Anton? Why can't we just work in the interface? Isn't that easier?
Yes. Okay. So if you go back, I will come back to this slide, but just to give some context, if we go back a few years, maybe 7, 8 to 10 years, it was very common that we use Google Analytics as the tool to kind of get all the data into that tool. So it was more common to work with imports to Google Analytics. So we tried many times to get the data, spend data into Google Analytics, offline commercials into Google Analytics to do the analysis in Google Analytics, in the interface. That has its limitations. Google Analytics isn't the tool to work with all kind of data. It's always related to user behavior, user interactions in a web or in an app. But there are so much other sources of data that isn't suitable to have in Google Analytics. And just to exemplify how we can work with BigQuery, a good, very common use case is when we have complex user journeys. So imagine this user journey where we have, let's say it's a streaming service or a SaaS product where you sign up. So on day one, you have an ad click. Next slide. And then you initiate a session, or the user initiates a session and a free trial. Next slide. We can, of course, use Google Analytics or any other web analytics tool to collect these events. This is where Google Analytics does its magic. Next slide. But there are user journeys or a customer journey after these interactions as well. So, for instance, let's say you start a free trial. You submit your credit card credentials, and after maybe we start a free trial on day one, but the user didn't pay for anything. So 7 days later, the subscription will activate, and there will be your card will be charged. So the subscription or the conversion actually occurs on day 7. But at that point, maybe the user isn't even active in the web or in an app. It's something that happens offline. And this is where you can, of course, use measurement protocol or similar technologies to send this data back to Google Analytics. Sometimes that's very suitable. But if you go to the next slide, this is where we often choose to instead export the data to Google BigQuery, because then you can start working with multiple data sources. So you can get the data out of Google Analytics, maybe together with a customer ID, and you can get the business data from other systems into Google BigQuery. And there we can start modeling. So we can start working with different attribution models. We can start working with different channel categorizations that we can change retroactively. We can have custom categorizations that aren't possible to do in Google Analytics. And we can start calculating CLV and other metrics. And we can use that data for reporting, for analysis, but we can also use it to upload offline conversions to tools like Google Ads through data manager integration to BigQuery, for instance. Yes, so use cases for that was just an example, but we have these customers, the possibility to customize. We can work with data modeling. We can use multiple tools. It could be Amplitude, if we have that kind of tool implemented in the app or in the product, while we use Google Analytics in the open marketing web. So we can combine these data sources and start applying our own custom data modeling. Attribution reporting, like I mentioned, but you can also combine this data in a much more simple way, where you can start calculating CLV and attribute that to your campaigns. And many times the data that we have in Google Analytics isn't perfect. So there might be duplicate conversions or conversions that we want to, for some reason, redact or change, adjust. So that we can do in BigQuery as well. And we can use BigQuery as a foundation for media mix modeling, where we save all that historical data, where we apply our own data modeling, and where we can use it as input to MMM tools. and like I mentioned, data activation such as offline conversions or cluster audience segments and upload to different tools. So in BigQuery, this is the environment where we prepare that data for upload. But also one thing that I use BigQuery a lot for is debugging, just to sanity check the data and investigate why things look the way they do. And for that reason, I think the GA4 export, for instance, is very useful to kind of zoom in to specific events and user journeys.
Yeah. And why BigQuery, you might ask? BigQuery is the data warehouse in Google Cloud, and it's very easy to work with when you use other Google services, such as it connects very well with GA4, Google Ads, Search Console, Gemini, Looker Studio, and so on. It's a pay-as-you-go service, so you only pay for what you use. So the queries you run and the data you store. So there is no fixed fee per month. So it's a very low bar to get started. And also it works very well multi-cloud. Even if you today use Azure or AWS or other services in your business, most of our clients work with different cloud providers, and and they connect very well in between, sharing data and so on. So even if you work with another cloud service today, that is not a blocker for start working with BigQuery. And this is a rehearsal from our last webinar. But just to remind that Google BigQuery sit in the middle. So you have all our different services or data sources. We will extract and load that data into BigQuery. And then, as Anton said, we will clean it and then use it for visualization, data activation, AI agents, and such. And with that said, what we're going to do today is that we are going to use Google Analytics. We're going to connect it to BigQuery and start the export of raw data. And then we're going to run some SQL queries to clean them. And then, as the last step, we're going to do a very simple visualization in Looker Studio, or as it's now called, Data Studio. So the first thing we need to do is to get the data into BigQuery from Google Analytics. And this is the most simple step. If you have a Google Analytics property today, you go into the admin settings. And I also want to point out, if you have any questions, just write them in chat as we speak, and we will answer them as we go. You will go into admin, and then you have product links, and then you have BigQuery link. And here you will create a new link to BigQuery. Before you do this, you have to create a BigQuery project and assign a credit card for billing. If you're unsure about this, speak to your IT department to discuss who have ownership of this, and they can prepare this for you. But I have already created a BigQuery project, so I can select that one. And then I can choose where, in what data center the data should reside. If you are a European company, you will most likely choose EU as data location. But if you are a US company, maybe you choose US, but speak to your IT department about this. And then you choose what data should be exported. And most of the time, it's a no-brainer to select all of these exports. The most commonly used one is the daily export. That's the one we will use, and that exports a full set of data every day. But we also have the streaming export that is a more of a live stream of data, and that is, I think, mostly used for if you set something live today and you want to debug it right away. But there is no reason not to activate it. And then you have user data export as well. We will not look at this today, but make sure to activate all of them when you set this up. And the last step, you will just review and submit, and it will start exporting the next day. And if we look at the property that we will use for the demo today, I already set this export up. You can go in and look here. I set it up on the 2nd of April this year. And this is very important because you only start to get data from the date that you set it up. So when we look in our BigQuery tables now, there will be no data prior to this date. So that's why I always tell everyone, even if you don't intend to start working with BigQuery today, start the export today. So you start to build this historic archive of data. Another thing to point out, that if you're using the free version of Google Analytics, there is a 1 million event limit that you can export. If you have the paid version, there is a much higher cap. What you could do if you are actually collecting more than 1 million events, but still want to enable the export, is that you can choose to exclude events from being exported. So let's say that you have maybe impression events or scroll events that amass a huge number, but you don't need them for your analysis. You can choose to exclude them here to get below the 1 million daily limit. But this export has been running now for a while, so I think it's time to dive into BigQuery. And I see that we have some questions already, Anton, in the Q&A, but I'm gonna focus on the demo, but we will get back to those questions in the end. So this is BigQuery, and we're not gonna go through all of BigQuery's features or how to write SQL, but you can see here that I have my project that I exported the data to. And in that project, I have data sets. And data sets is kind of like a folder that holds all our tables. And the GA4 event export always creates a data set that is named like this, analytics underline, and then there will be a number. And that number is the property ID that you find up here. So if you have several properties here exporting to the same BigQuery project, and that is fine, then you can use this number to differentiate which table is which. And if we open that data set up, we will see that we have data for two exports. We have the user export. We will not work with that today. And we have the event export, the one we're going to use. And here we can see the schema for the table. The schema is the columns of the table. And if there are, of course, a lot of columns here, and if you want to deep dive into those, I can really recommend the official documentation, the BigQuery export schema. I will post the link to it in the chat right away, so don't forget. And that is pretty much your go-to in understanding these tables, and it explains all the different columns of the table. We can do a preview to see our data in the table. And here we can see that every row is one event. So if we send an add to cart, a page view, a purchase, that will be 3 rows in our database. And let's scroll down so we get something. Yeah, here. An add to cart. We can see the event date, the timestamp, and we can see the parameters that was sent with it. Some we sent from GTM, and some was added by GA, such as session ID or engagement time and such. We also have user information. We have device information. So this was on a desktop with an Apple device. And there's a lot of information here. Geo information, if we have that enabled. E-commerce information, we will look at that, such as revenue and so on. Items, this was an add to cart. So here we have the item that was added to the cart with this event, and so on. And we will deep dive into some of these columns. But as I said, I really recommend the documentation. So let's start off with a simple query. I need my notes. See where we are. We're going to query this table. And let's prettify. So let's start off with an easy question just to get all the data and see what we have here. Let's say we want to make a first query and see what events do we actually have in this table. So that we can go event name. And here the auto suggestion actually helps me and say that, yes, I want to count all rows. And I want to group it by together on event name. And then I will get a nice tidy report showing all the event names I have in this table and the event count for those. How many rows do we have? So we have 8 view item. And we can also do an order by to descending. So we sort by the second column descending. Good. But we don't have any date here. So for what date is this? Well, the event export is exported into a sharded table, it's called. So it creates one table for every day. So we can see here that now I'm querying the table from 24th of May in 2026. So let's say that instead I want to query all of May. I can go like this. Instead of querying one table after another, I can use a wildcard. So I will get all tables from May and get an event count. But let's then say I want this to be a bit more dynamic. I want to set a state or a date range. Well, what we can use then is, if I go like this, it will give me all tables, all of my history. But we can go where, and here I want to show this first, that there is a hidden column called table suffix. And table suffix is the part that was removed, you could say, with the wildcard. And that we can use to target a specific date. So here you can see that the table suffix column actually contains the date now. So let's use that in a where statement, where table suffix is, let's say, equal or larger than 2026 0101. So 1st of January and forward. And this is also good practice to never query like all of your data because it could incur a high cost for you. So the table suffix is what we will commonly use to like select date ranges that we want to pick up. Okay, but this is just event level data. If we go back and look at the table, what we very commonly want to access as well is, of course, the event parameters. And event parameters is sent with key value. So we could have a key currency, and the value is GBP, British pound. Or it could be value, and the key is named value, and the value is 150. So let's say we want to access this. This is where it becomes just a bit more complicated because these are nested. And what that means is that an event is one row, but one event can have several parameters. Here you see that this add to cart event have around 10 parameters. So what they do then is that they create this nested block. So we can't just access, so let's say we want to access the currency, just this parameter for this event. Well, then we need to unnest this block. So let's create a new query, and we could go event name and the event params block just to show it. Good, and we will add a bit more. So let's say that we only want a page view. So we have something we recognize. No, we can't, of course, don't do it like that. Event name equal page view. Good. So let's say that for our page view events, let's say we want to build a page location report. We want to see what URLs are most commonly visited. And therefore, we need an event parameter that is called page location. And how we can access these is by doing an unnest of the event params object. So we will go unnest event params as EP, we can call that. So we will unnest the whole event params object, call it EP, and then return that for all our page view events. Okay, good. So, and what this does is that you remember we had a page view event and it have 10 event parameters. What it will do now is then actually create 10 rows out of that. So this is probably the same page view event, and it expanded it. So now every parameter is a new row. And we therefore, if we only want the page location, we want to be a bit more specific. So let's say we want page location here. We can go and EP the column key equals page location. So therefore we narrow it down. We don't want batch ordering ID or these other ones. We just want the page location rows. And also if you look at the columns, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. value columns. And this is because an event parameter could be a string, but it could also be an integer, but it could also be a float or a double. So we need to decide which one of these four we need to pick up, but the page location will most likely be a string. So we only need that column. So instead of picking up the whole block, we can go like that, the EP key and the EP dot value dot string value. So the name of this column. So what we are doing now is that we are zeroing in on what parameter do we want and what value for it do we want by using EP key equals page location and this column. Okay, great. So now we have a good ground for making a page location report out of this. But this is a pretty messy way to work with it, because most likely now what if we want also the page title and such? We want to unnest more event parameters. Well, there is a better way to do this, and that is to do it inline instead. So what we're going to do, instead of unnesting it here, we're going to do a subquery. So we can do a query within the query. So we will do a select. And here it helps me a bit. So we will select the string value. Let's remove that from there. From unnesting the event parameters, where the key, do I need to name it maybe? Good, and we don't have this anymore. So what we did now is that we moved all of this logic with unnesting and selecting the right columns and rows into a subquery. So it's much cleaner. And we will save that as page location. So just to repeat, we unnested the event params. We looked for the event parameter named page location, our key. We only want that one. And we want the string value for that parameter. And then we store that value as page location. So here we get a much, much cleaner report. And just to show that it's now easy for us to add other columns, we could go, is it named page title? Probably. Yes, like that. So now we have for all our page view events, we have our page location and page title. So this is how you will work with event parameters. And I'm just gonna, let's see, I'm just gonna check on the chat.
Yeah, we have one question that is suitable to take up now. So we have one question saying, why are there more page views and add to cart events than session starts?
Yeah.
And that goes back to what we actually see in these source tables. So every row, every record in these tables represents an event. So one user that if we look at a session, for instance, we have if we have a session containing 60 events, then we will have one session start event.
Yeah.
While we will have, of course, lots more events occurring during that session. So each and every row doesn't correspond to a session; it corresponds to an event. Yeah. So each session have one session start event, but there can, of course, be multiple page views and add to cart events within that session.
Yeah, so we could have here, Anton arrives on site, there will be a session start event, he have his first page view, he have a second page view, and then he does an add to cart. So that's perfectly fine. So we need to remember event scope, session scope, a user. A user could have several sessions, and each session could contain several events. Also we got, is it necessary to give alias at the time of unnest? If you're referring to this as the alias, we don't need to do that. And I guess then what comes up to the subquery will just be named like this, like column 0, column 1, and such. So I always recommend to attach an alias as this, but we can name it whatever we want.
Yeah, but that question came up when you were nesting on table level, and not
maybe this one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
The reason why I do that is that because I want to easily be able to access what comes out of the nest here. I think it's just good practice to always name all entities when you work in BigQuery. So just as we show here, that no, I didn't need to give them an alias. My subqueries, my tables and so on, but it's so much easier to, because if they're, it's much easier to reference them at a later stage. So I always recommend to alias everything that you do. But maybe not necessary always. Okay. Great questions, keep them coming. So that is how we work with event parameters. And I'm gonna check my notes where we go from here. Okay, good. But that's a good segue because now we have talked about events. But very commonly when we work with GA, we talk about sessions. And let's say that we now want to see instead how many sessions do we have per day, not events, sessions per day. And then we're gonna go back. Let's go back here a bit. And just look at our data. What do we need to determine if this event here and this event here belongs to the same session, or are there two different sessions in user? We need to look at two different values. And the first value we have as an identifier is the user saved ID. And the user saved ID is the value that is stored in the GA cookie in the user's browser. So it's not actually a user ID, it's more of a cookie ID. So if these events here came, let's see, 061, it looks like it's the same value. So these two events came from the same browser, we could say the same user. But that doesn't tell us if it's the same session or not, because let's say we have a session timeout of 2 hours. One of these events could be in the morning, another one in the afternoon. So that could be two different sessions. And to determine that, we also have to look at the GA session ID. And we need to combine that with the user saved ID, because two users, hypothetically, me and Anton can arrive at the site at the same time and get the same GA session ID, but we would most likely have different user saved ID. So to determine an actual session, we need to take the user saved ID and merge it with the GA session ID and look, is that unique or not? But we are experts at SQL now, so we can easily do that. We will access the user saved ID. We can go for any event. That is easy one to get. The GA session ID here is nested in these parameters in the int value, but we are expert at that as well. So we can go with a subquery to select ep.value. It helps us here. Thank you, Gemini. Int value. We want the int value, and we want where the key is GA session ID. Looks okay to me. Good. So we have the user saved ID and we have the GA session ID. And what we can then do next is to merge them together, because now they are in separate columns. We can use the concat function for that. Concat just lets you enter a list of strings and it will merge them together. It's sort of like when you do a plus sign with JavaScript between strings. So we can go like that. And I'm gonna do that. We don't need that, but it's just for clarity. And then the GA session ID. And we can call that as real session ID. Good. So now we can use this to determine if an event is, or if different events are within the same session. And we can also use this to count how many unique sessions ID do we have per day. That will be the number of sessions per day. So let's go with that. We will go event date, and we will count distinct sessions ID per day, and we will call that number of sessions. And we need to group it together by event date. So we count session IDs and group by event date. Group by event date. So this is also a very common query. We see that we don't have that much traffic to our e-commerce store. But here we can see on the 24th of May, we had 4 sessions. On the 18th, we have 5 sessions, and so on. So this is a great start for building a session report. And I'm also just going to show how we could expand this. We could do a count distinct user pseudo ID, because we also want to count how many users. We know that there is 5 sessions on this date, but how many users did we have as number of users? And we also want to say just how many events per day we have. Then we will count everything, so all rows, because remember, every row is an event, number of events. And we can sort it to get the latest. Yes, we see here on the 24th of May, we had 4 users that in total had 4 sessions, and in total they have 40 events. So here you can clearly see like the scope. Users can have several sessions, a session can have several events. Great start for making a report of our visitors to the site.
Johan, I can jump in with one of the questions. Is it recommended to have multiple tables in BigQuery, like we do in Power BI modeling? The way I understand this question is basically, we rarely, when we work with the BigQuery data, we rarely work directly. We never let the visualization tool work directly to the BigQuery tables, because what we want to do is to flatten the table. We don't want any nested data to be read by a visualization tool. So we often end up having multiple tables in BigQuery. So we have maybe 20, 30 tables doing serving different purposes and different reports. So it could be one table containing all the sessions, all the source medium attributes, campaign ID, costs related to that campaign ID, what channel drove it, and the conversions and the CLV, the profit, etc. So that could be like one master table to serve a marketing dashboard, while we have other tables serving other purposes, such as errors on the website, for instance. So we rarely work. We always model the data and prepare the data before we let a visualization to consume it.
Yes.
Hope that answers the question.
Yes, great input. So just to quickly jump back to the slide, So this is how we can visualize it. Now we are working with the raw data. We don't want to connect the raw data to Power BI, for example. We want this layer that Anton described, like a cleaned data layer, aggregated tables, and that we will use to connect to these different tools. And I posted in the chat a video that we did, I think earlier this spring, where we talk just about this, how you can organize your data into different tables. Yeah, exactly, and with a star schema. So you will create different tables from the raw data. Most likely, what we go for is that you have an event table, a session table, and a user table, and then you can have business-specific reports after that. We work a lot with data form to organize this, so this could be a natural next step for you if you want it more organized and you're working with several different tools. Great question.
Nice. On a tangent to that, just to bring up another question that is a bit related. So there was one question regarding costs related to activating the BigQuery export. And we've done webinars and blog posts about BigQuery cost optimization. So and go to our website and read about the, sorry, Johan.
I actually, I didn't mean to open it, but I want to post a link, but here you can see it, that our colleague wrote a great article on this, on how the BigQuery cost, how it works and how you can optimize it. So I definitely recommend that. And he also did a webinar, and you can find that on our YouTube channel as well. So that's a great thing to look at before you dive too deep into BigQuery.
And also that is brought up in the blog post. But if we would let the visualization tool read directly from the BigQuery export, that would come with costs if you are working with high volumes. So it's a lot better to model the data and have them refreshed daily, and then you can read from those tables instead, where you basically you aggregate the data and you remove columns that aren't necessary for the visualization tool.
Definitely. So we did a very simple report just to count sessions per day and users. A very commonly thing you want to add in is attribution. Where did this session come from? The most common question. And there's a number of ways how we could use the BigQuery dataset to calculate attribution, and what we mean with that. That's a webinar per se. But I would say there is the most common ways forward is that either you create your own logic for attribution with SQL. That is, you get a very granular control. But if you just want to start off with mimicking the attribution that you have in the GA interface, you could use the session traffic source last click record. And within that, you have the cross-channel campaign. So session traffic source last click, cross-channel campaign. And here you can see the default channel group, source medium, campaign, and so on. And these very closely mimics what you see with the last click attribution in the interface. And if you want to deep dive into the other ones, you can, of course, find all the info about them in the documentation. But let's start off with this one. Oops, it opened it there. So we have that column. And let's say that we just want to calculate per event date. What channel group did we have? And I'm going to go back and just steal this number of session snippet here. Let's see, and then we need to group by all, and we can order by event date descending. And it will hopefully make sense when we see the result. So here we can see per event date and per channel group, how many sessions did we have? So on the 24th, we had 3 sessions from direct traffic and 1 session from paid social. And then we could, of course, go ahead and, let's say, are they called source? Yeah, source medium. I need to add a comma. So this is how I would recommend you to start with looking at session attribution in BigQuery. And from here on, you could start applying your own logic if you want different lookback windows, different channel groups logics, and so on. Okay. But from here, I think it's time to start talking a bit about visualization. And we touched upon it with Power BI and Data Studio and such, because sure, it's great to sit here and run ad hoc queries, but I think our stakeholders want to have something more visual. So let's see how we can get this data and the results of these queries into Data Studio. And I will do it very simple today, is that the result of this query, I will save in a table. So we can go save results, or we can actually do like this, or I can do it like this, query settings. So when I just run the query, it just saves it temporarily in the memory. But now I want to store it more persistent, so I can set a destination table. And I will create a new data set where I will store it, demo result. And EU. And this you only need to do once. And the result here I will call GA4 session attribution, we could call it. And I will overwrite the table if it already exists. And that's all we need. So now it will actually save the result into a table when we run it. Good. And we see that it saved it into a table. We can open that table. And we can see it here. And we can now connect this table to Data Studio or even Power BI or any other visualization tool. So I prepared myself by creating a new Data Studio report. And I can add data. Here you probably already added sources like Google Analytics or Google Ads, but you can see that it's very easy to also access BigQuery from here. And here you have the project that we were working in. We can see all the data sets that I can access. And there I find my table. Yes. As a data source. So now Looker Studio or Data Studio, sorry, will read data from that table. And yeah, this is a very simple way to show how we can get data from Google Analytics or other data sources into BigQuery, apply our own logic, create these clean tables, and then use these clean tables in visualization tools. And of course, if we're going to put this into production, we would like to schedule this so it updates every day with new data. We will look at that in the future. But I think that's where we will hold for today. And let's see if there is any more questions, Anton, before we call it a day.
Yes, so we had one question. Is the external data sources export to BigQuery native, or does it require third-party help? So it's Liron asking and referring to Meta and Bing and these external
Go back to this.
external tools.
Yes, so most of the Google services have this built-in exports to BigQuery, and they are free. If we want to get other things like LinkedIn, Meta, Bing, you most likely need a third-party tool. Google is working on developing built-in connectors for those. They are not really there yet, I would say. So I would recommend you to look at a third-party tool to help you with that, to load data into BigQuery if there's not a built-in connector.
Yeah, and Control Digital, we have on top of a open source connector tool. So we help our clients set this up through our solution as well. Yep. Where we not only do the set up the connectors, we also model the data for you. So we take the GA4 export, the Google Ads export, DV360 export, but also Facebook or Meta, LinkedIn, Bing Ads, etc., and model that data for you and output like clean tables in your GCP project, ready for use, basically.
Yeah. Good input. And then we have another question here. See if we are planning to develop more webinars. Definitely. We will talk more about this. There is so much to deep dive into here, and this was just to show how to get started. But as the writers say, you could deep dive into attribution models. We can show how to join GA data with other data sets and so on, more hands-on. And I really recommend, we have some webinars recorded on this. So I really recommend our YouTube channel, where we have talked about marketing data warehouse, BigQuery, and so on. So watch those recordings and keep an eye out for the future. And I want to, speaking of the future, I'm going to put this up here. Subscribe to our newsletter. I will put in the link so you get all the upcoming webinars and blog posts that we write on this topic. Let's see, was there anything else? Can you export raw event level data from Campaign Manager 360 into BigQuery? I think so. I haven't worked with it personally, but I think there is transfer in BigQuery. So you can connect Campaign Manager and Google's different ad platforms to BigQuery. I'm not sure of the granularity, if it's event level or if it's aggregated, but I would do a quick Google for Campaign Manager 360 BigQuery transfer and see what you get. Okay, I think that is for today. Thank you everyone for joining, and see you at the next webinar.